First contact's price. The observatory at Mauna Kea fell silent as Dr. Elena Rodriguez stared at her readings in disbelief. The massive solar flare she'd been tracking wasn't just powerful, it was civilization ending. Humanity had less than 72 hours before the electromagnetic blast would strip Earth's atmosphere, ending 4 billion years of evolution in one terrible moment. Send the data to every major observatory, she ordered, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. Wake everyone. We need confirmation. Within hours, the awful truth was undeniable. The flare would hit with the force of 1,000 nuclear weapons, and Earth had no defense against it. As governments worldwide struggled to respond to the impending catastrophe, something unprecedented appeared in Earth's orbit. The ship emerged from what appeared to be a tear in space itself, its crystalline surface refracting sunlight in impossible patterns. It was massive, nearly the size of Manhattan, and unlike anything humanity had ever built or imagined. The world's military powers scrambled their forces, but before any could react, a message reached every communications device on Earth simultaneously. "We are the Meridians," the transmission began, translated perfectly into every human language. "We have been watching your world for some time. The stellar event approaching your planet will destroy all life on your surface. We cannot allow this." The ship's purpose became clear as it positioned itself between Earth and the Sun. Its crystalline surface began to pulse with energy, creating a shield of pure light that stretched across space like an aurora. When the solar flare hit, the Meridian vessel absorbed the full force of the blast. The ship's shields held, but at a terrible cost. As the danger passed, the vessel's magnificent crystalline surface began to crack and dim. A final message reached Earth. "Our ship's power core is destabilizing. We must leave your orbit immediately. Our civilization is dying. Our sun failed centuries ago, and we have been searching the galaxy for a new home. This vessel contained the last of our energy reserves. We give this freely to your world, knowing it means we cannot continue our search. Your species shows great promise. Remember this day." Before anyone could respond, the damaged ship vanished into another spatial tier, leaving behind only fragments of its crystalline hull that fell like shooting stars through Earth's atmosphere. The world's greatest scientists scrambled to recover these fragments, finding them to be composed of materials that defied known physics. Each shard contained more technological advancement than humanity had achieved in its entire history. But more than technology, the Meridians had given humanity something else, a profound lesson in sacrifice and a debt that could never be truly repaid. Dr. Rodriguez led the initial research team studying the Meridian technology. They could have used this energy to save themselves, she told the United Nations Security Council. Instead, they chose to save us, a species they had never met. We owe them everything. The fragments revolutionized human technology. Within a decade, humanity had learned to harness new forms of energy, created their first faster-than-light drives, and begun to understand the fundamental forces of the universe in ways they never had before. But they never forgot the price of their survival. Every school child learned about the Meridian sacrifice. Every new spacecraft carried a crystalline memorial. Humanity expanded into space with a singular purpose: to find the Meridians and repay their debt. They established the Stellar Observation Network, a massive array of telescopes and sensors designed to search for any sign of the dying civilization. 20 years passed. Humanity spread across their solar system, establishing colonies on Mars and the moons of Jupiter. They built ships that could traverse light years in days. But of the Meridians, they found no trace. Until one day, at a remote listening post in the Kuiper Belt, a young technician picked up a familiar energy signature. It matched the crystalline fragments exactly. Somewhere, across the vast expanse of space, the Meridians still existed. And now, humanity had the means to find them. As Dr. Rodriguez, now director of the United Earth Space Agency, reviewed the data, she smiled. "Prepare the fleet," she ordered. "It's time to repay our debt." The race to save the Meridians was about to begin, but no one could have predicted the terrible threat that awaited humanity in the dark between the stars, or how their quest to save their saviors would change the galaxy forever. The Silent Hunters. Admiral Sarah Chen stood at the bridge of the UES Prometheus, humanity's most advanced starship, staring at the holographic display with growing horror. Before her floated the image of a dead star system, not naturally dead, but murdered. "Play it again," she ordered, her voice barely a whisper. The sensor logs showed the same impossible scene. Dark, web-like structures surrounding the system's sun, literally drinking its energy until nothing remained but a cold, dark husk. The Prometheus had been following the Meridian energy signature for 3 months when they discovered this graveyard of worlds. 5 planets, once teeming with life, now frozen in eternal winter. Their sun, once like Earth's own, reduced to a black cinder. Admiral, her science officer, Dr. James Patel, approached with a tablet. "We've analyzed the structures. They're artificial, but unlike anything we've ever seen. They appear to be organic technology, living machines that feed directly on stellar energy." Sarah's mind raced back to her academy days, to the stories of the Meridians and their dying sun. Could this be what happened to the Meridian homeworld? She wondered aloud. A sudden alert pierced the bridge's tense atmosphere. Multiple spatial distortions detected. The sensor officer shouted, "Something's coming through." The crew watched in stunned silence as massive shapes emerged from the void. They were beautiful in their terrible way, like living shadows given form, their surfaces rippling with patterns that hurt the eye to look at. Where they passed, the very starlight seemed to dim. "Void stalkers," Dr. Patel breathed, naming humanity's new enemy. "They're not just feeding on stars, they're hunting them, hunting civilizations." The Prometheus's stealth systems, reverse-engineered from Meridian technology, kept them hidden as they observed the cosmic predators. The Void Stalkers moved with terrible purpose, deploying their energy-draining webs as they prepared to claim another star. "Track their trajectory," Sarah ordered. "Where are they heading?" The answer came moments later, and it chilled her to the bone. The Void Stalkers were moving toward the source of the Meridian energy signature, toward the last survivors of the civilization that had saved Earth. Sarah called an emergency conference with the ship's senior staff. "The Meridians sacrificed their last energy reserves to save us from a solar flare," she reminded them. "Now we know why they were so desperate to find a new home. These things destroyed their civilization, and they're still hunting the survivors. We can't fight them conventionally," Dr. Patel explained, displaying their sensor data. "They absorb energy weapons, and their organic technology adapts to any damage. They've probably been doing this for millions of years, consuming civilizations to fuel their eternal hunger. Then we don't fight conventionally," Sarah declared. She pulled up the schematics for Project Helios, humanity's most closely guarded secret. 20 years ago, the Meridians showed us how to manipulate stellar energy. We learned more than they intended. We learned how to create it. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Project Helios was supposed to be humanity's solution to eternal energy needs, artificial stars created through technology derived from the Meridian crystals. But Sarah saw another use for it now. "These hunters have never faced a prey that could fight back on their level," she said. "They manipulate stellar energy. Fine, we'll give them more than they can handle." She opened a channel to Earth Command, knowing her next words would change the course of human history. "This is Admiral Chen. The Meridians are in danger, and we found what drove them from their home. Requesting immediate authorization to implement Project Helios as a weapons system. We're going hunting." As the Prometheus raced back to Earth to prepare for the coming battle, Sarah watched the dead star system recede into the distance. The Void Stalkers had hunted the Meridians across the galaxy, destroying countless civilizations in their wake. But they had never encountered humans before, and humans remembered their debts. The real war was about to begin. And this time, the hunters would learn what it meant to become the hunted. Operation Starkeeper. The massive shipyards orbiting Mars hummed with unprecedented activity. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, now in her 70s but sharp as ever, watched as engineers installed the experimental Helios cores into the fleet's flagship vessels. Each core contained the power of a miniature sun, built from the knowledge gleaned from those crystalline fragments that had fallen to Earth 2 decades ago. Will it work? Admiral Chen asked, floating beside her in the observation dome. The two women had become unlikely friends during the frantic preparations for humanity's most ambitious military operation. The physics are sound, Elena replied, her wrinkled hands tracing the equations floating in the holographic display. But we're about to do something that's never been attempted: create artificial stars as weapons. The Void Stalkers feed on stellar energy, yes, but what happens when they try to consume more than they can handle? The plan was audacious. Project Helios had been designed to create sustainable miniature stars for colony power generation. Now, they were modifying the technology to create unstable stellar masses, cosmic bombs that could overwhelm the Void Stalkers' energy-absorbing capabilities. The operation had drawn resources from every human colony and settlement. Mining outposts in the asteroid belt worked around the clock to provide raw materials. The Mars colonies had converted their entire industrial capacity to warship production. Even the lunar bases had been transformed into training facilities for the fleet crews. 6 months, Sarah mused, watching another Helios core being loaded. 6 months since we discovered them. And we're about to wage war on beings that have probably existed longer than our species. Elena smiled. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our resources. It's our ability to adapt, to take an impossible situation and turn it on its head. The Void Stalkers have never faced an enemy that could fight them on their own terms. The final preparations moved swiftly. The fleet consisted of 30 ships, each equipped with a Helios core and crews trained to use them. The largest vessel, the UES Meridian's Pride, carried the operation's secret weapon, a modified Helios core capable of generating a full-sized stellar mass. As the launch date approached, they received new intelligence from the stealth probes monitoring the Void Stalkers. The cosmic predators were closing in on their target, a distant solar system showing signs of meridian energy signatures. They had perhaps 2 weeks before the hunters reached their prey. The night before launch, Sarah stood before the assembled fleet crews in the Mars Orbital Station's main hangar. Thousands of faces looked back at her, representing every nation and colony of humanity. 20 years ago, a dying civilization chose to save us instead of themselves, she began, her voice carrying across the silent chamber. They gave us their last hope, their final reserves of energy, asking nothing in return. They showed us what it means to sacrifice everything for another species' survival. She gestured to the fleet visible through the hangar's massive windows. Now we have a chance to repay that debt. But this isn't just about obligation. This is about who we are as a species. When the Meridians saved us, they bet on humanity's potential. They believed we were worth saving. The Void Stalkers have existed for eons, consuming civilizations, destroying worlds. They believe they're the apex predators of the cosmos, but they've never encountered humans before. They've never faced a species that could turn their own weapons against them. They've never met prey that hunts back. The chamber erupted in cheers as Sarah raised her hand. Operation Starkeeper begins at dawn. We carry with us humanity's best technology, our finest warriors, and our most powerful weapons. But more importantly, we carry the legacy of 2 civilizations, our own, and the one that believed in us enough to sacrifice everything. The Void Stalkers think they're hunting the last of the Meridians. Instead, they're about to face humanity, and we're going to teach them why that's a mistake they won't survive to regret. As the crews dispersed to their ships, Elena caught Sarah's arm. The Meridians saved us with their dying light, the old scientist said softly. How fitting that we'll save them by creating new ones. Dawn came to Mars. 30 ships lifted from their moorings, their Helios cores humming with contained stellar fire. As they formed up for the jump to faster-than-light speed, Sarah sent one final message to Earth Command. Operation Starkeeper is go. We're about to remind the galaxy why you should never underestimate humanity. Chen out. The fleet vanished into the darkness between the stars, carrying with them humanity's answer to the cosmic predators that had hunted the Meridians for so long. The time had come to turn the hunters into the hunted. The light of humanity. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the target system. Before them lay a sight none had ever witnessed, a Meridian world. The planet glowed with a soft, crystalline light, its cities looking like constellations against the surface. But the beauty of the scene was marred by the approaching shadows of the Void Stalkers, their massive forms already beginning to weave their energy-draining webs around the system's sun. Multiple contacts, the tactical officer of the Meridian's Pride announced, counting 15 Void Stalker vessels, each larger than anything we've encountered before. Admiral Chen stood at the command center, her face illuminated by the holographic battle display. They've already begun their feeding process, she noted, watching the dark webs expand. Launch the probes. Let's see if our theories about their hunting patterns are correct. Dozens of small, unmanned vessels shot forth from the human fleet, each carrying a miniature Helios core programmed to activate on command. The Void Stalkers, detecting the new energy sources, immediately turned their attention to what they perceived as easy prey. They're taking the bait, Dr. Paddle reported from his science station. Their energy absorption fields are redirecting toward our probes. Sarah allowed herself a grim smile. Now we see if hunger truly is their weakness. All ships, execute pattern Sunforge. The human fleet split into 3 groups, moving with precision that would have been impossible without 20 years of practicing with Meridian-derived technology. As the Void Stalkers moved to intercept the probes, Sarah gave the command they'd all been waiting for. Detonate the probes. The miniature Helios cores activated simultaneously, each one releasing the energy of a small star. The Void Stalkers, their feeding apparatus already engaged, found themselves forced to absorb far more power than they'd anticipated. Several of their smaller vessels began to rupture, their organic technology unable to process the sudden surge of energy. But the larger hunters adapted quickly, their forms shifting to channel the excess power. They turned toward the human fleet, their surfaces rippling with stolen stellar energy. They're charging some kind of weapon. Tactical warned. Energy readings are off the scale. All ships, execute evasive pattern Delta. Sarah ordered. Deploy solar shields. The human vessels scattered as beams of concentrated stellar energy lanced through space where they'd been moments before. Their shields, designed using principles learned from the original Meridian vessel, held against the onslaught but glowed dangerously hot. On the surface of the crystalline planet below, lights began to flicker as the Meridian colony detected the battle above. A transmission reached the human fleet, the same perfect translation technology they used 20 years ago, making the message clear. Unknown vessels, we detect human energy signatures. Why have you come to this place of exile? Sarah opened a channel. We are the children of Earth, here to repay a debt 2 decades old. Your people saved our world. Now we're here to save yours. There was a moment of silence. Then, the hunters have found us. There is no escape. Save yourselves. That's not how humanity operates, Sarah replied. Dr. Rodriguez, are you ready? Elena's voice came over the comm from her position in the engineering bay of the Meridian's Pride. Helios Prime is charged. We'll only get one shot at this. Sarah turned to her tactical display. The Void Stalkers were regrouping, their larger vessels moving to shield the damaged ones. They were learning, adapting, just as humans had learned and adapted from the Meridians. All ships, form up on the Pride. Execute Operation Daybreak. The human fleet moved as one, forming a sphere around their flagship. The Meridian's Pride's massive Helios core began to pulse with blinding light as it initiated its primary function, not to create a small, stable star, but to trigger a controlled stellar nova. The Void Stalkers sensed the building energy and rushed forward, their hunger overwhelming their caution. This was exactly what Sarah had counted on. "Now," she commanded. The Helios Prime core released its full power. For a brief moment, a new star blazed in the heart of the human fleet. The Void Stalkers, committed to their attack, found themselves caught in their own feeding webs, unable to process the sheer magnitude of energy being forced into their systems. The result was spectacular. The largest Void Stalkers began to break apart, their organic technology overloading as they desperately tried to contain the power of a newborn star. The smaller ones simply disintegrated, their matter converted to pure energy by the stellar forces they tried to consume. As the light faded, the human fleet emerged from behind their combined shields. Of the 15 Void Stalkers, only debris remained, scattered across space like black confetti. "Status report," Sarah ordered, blinking spots from her eyes. "Helios Prime is depleted but stable," Elena reported. "All ships reporting in. We have minimal casualties, mostly from radiation exposure. The Meridian colony is intact." Sarah looked at the crystalline world below, its lights now burning bright and steady. Another transmission came from the surface. "What you have done, it should not have been possible." "How?" Sarah smiled, thinking of that day 20 years ago, when a dying ship had saved her world. "Your people taught us that sometimes the impossible is simply waiting for someone willing to attempt it. Welcome to a galaxy where the Void Stalkers are no longer the apex predators." The light of the system's natural sun seemed brighter somehow as the human fleet moved to establish contact with the Meridian colony. They had done what no other civilization had managed in millions of years. They had beaten the hunters at their own game. And they had done it not through superior technology or overwhelming force, but through the very thing that had saved Earth so long ago: the willingness to risk everything to save another species. Legacy of Two Worlds. A year after the battle of the Meridian colony, the crystalline spires of New Aurora rose from the surface of Mars, its architecture a stunning blend of human and Meridian design. Within its great assembly hall, representatives from both species gathered to witness a historic moment. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, now confined to a hover chair, but her mind as brilliant as ever, watched with pride as Admiral Sarah Chen and the Meridian High Chancellor, a being of living crystal and light, signed the Stellar Concordat. The document wasn't just a treaty. It was a promise of a shared future between two civilizations that had each staved the other. "Let the record show," the Chancellor's melodious voice resonated through the chamber, "that on this day we formalize not just an alliance, but a recognition of a truth we have forgotten in our long exile. That strength lies not in isolation, but in the bonds we forge with others." The Meridian delegation glowed with subtle colors that humans had learned to recognize as joy. Their civilization, once on the brink of extinction, was flowering again. The combined knowledge of human innovation and Meridian wisdom had already yielded remarkable fruits. In orbit above Mars, the first of the new Helios arrays was nearing completion. Unlike the weapon that had destroyed the Void Stalkers, these were designed to create stable, sustainable artificial stars. The technology would allow both species to establish colonies in systems that had lost their natural suns to the hunter's predation. "We thought ourselves dying," the Chancellor continued, "our last act of significance being the salvation of a young species we barely knew. Instead, that act became the seed of our own resurrection. Human ingenuity took our final gift and transformed it into something we never imagined possible." Sarah stepped forward to address the assembly. 20 years ago, humanity looked up at the stars and knew we were not alone. We learned this not through violence or conquest, but through an act of sacrifice that saved our entire world. The Meridians could have used their last energy reserves to save themselves. Instead, they chose to save us. She gestured to the massive window overlooking the Martian landscape, where human and Meridian buildings stood side by side. "We promised ourselves we would repay that debt, but in doing so, We discovered something far more valuable than mere repayment. We found a friendship that will reshape the galaxy. In the years that followed, the partnership between humans and Meridians led to achievements neither species could have accomplished alone. The Helios arrays brought light to darkness. Terraforming technology restored worlds the Void Stalkers had left for dead, and faster-than-light travel became more efficient than ever before. But perhaps the most profound change was cultural. Humanity's demonstration of loyalty. Their determination to repay a debt across decades and light years attracted attention from other spacefaring races that had hidden themselves from the Void Stalkers. The galaxy, they discovered, was full of intelligent life, all of it connected by the Hunter's long reign of terror. As Elena watched New Aurora grow from her laboratory window, she often reflected on that terrible day when she'd first detected the solar flare that should have ended humanity. The Meridians had saved Earth knowing it meant sacrificing their own future. Humanity had saved the Meridians knowing they might lose everything in the attempt. Both gambles had paid off beyond anyone's wildest dreams. One evening, as the artificial sun set behind the Martian mountains, Elena received a visitor. It was one of her Meridian students, a young crystalline being who had been studying human history. "Teacher," the student asked, their form shimmering with curiosity, "I understand why you helped us. You were repaying a debt. But why did our ancestors save Earth? They had never met humans. They couldn't have known you would help us in return." Elena smiled, remembering the shooting stars that had been fragments of that first Meridian ship. "Sometimes," she said, "the greatest acts of wisdom come not from calculation, but from hope. Your ancestors looked at our world and saw potential, not just for survival, but for something greater. They took a chance on humanity." She gestured to the city around them, where humans and Meridians worked side by side to build a future neither species could have imagined alone. "And humanity took a chance on you in return. That's the real legacy of our two worlds, not the technology we've created or the enemies we've defeated, but the trust we placed in each other. In the end, that trust gave birth to something remarkable, a future where no species need face the darkness alone." The student glowed with understanding as they looked out over the city. In the distance, a new ship was launching, its crew a mixture of humans and Meridians. They were heading out to help another recently discovered civilization